I'm the porcelain doll in his private collection. But then a childhood sweetheart of his came to my house to provoke me. I had no choice but to use sign language to say that I willingly left and wished them happiness. However, Alexander Vanderbilt translated my words as, "She told you to get lost, you milk-drinking brat. Stop bothering our happy life." I frantically shook my head in denial. Alexander Vanderbilt coldly added, "If you don't leave now, I'll turn your head into a drum." Victoria Kensington left in shame, while Alexander Vanderbilt looked at me with a smug expression. "Did I translate it correctly?" he asked. "Yes, you're an amazing translator. Next time, don't bother." In fact, this wasn't the first time Alexander Vanderbilt deliberately misinterpreted my sign language. Like now, I had clearly made the sign for stop countless times, but he only glanced at my upright finger against my palm and casually said, "I get it. You want another round, don't you?" If I didn't have this kind of skill, how could I possibly take care of a little thing like you? I shook my head in despair, but the firm yet gentle grip at the nape of my neck held me in place. In an instant, his domineering lips captured mine again. I couldn't breathe. Furious, I kicked at him repeatedly. "If you were this strong when facing your love rival, I wouldn't have to step in for you," his deep, mocking voice whispered in my ear. "So he did it on purpose." I signed, telling him he didn't have to interfere. "You don't need me to interfere? So, do you really want to leave me?" I turned my face away, silently admitting it. Alexander Vanderbilt's eyes darkened visibly. His grip on my waist tightened. He was angry. Sensing this, I hurriedly signed an apology. But he immediately caught my hand, lifted it to his lips, and bit my finger gently, a soft punishment. But what followed was neither soft nor gentle. He claimed me fiercely until I was dizzy, and before I completely lost consciousness, I heard his icy voice in my ear. "Lillian Carter, you can't speak. If you leave me, do you think anyone else will want you?" Alexander Vanderbilt's anger lasted until the next morning. Before leaving, he gave the housekeeper strict orders. "No one is allowed to enter this house except for me." I understood. He didn't want yesterday's incident to happen again. Honestly, I wasn't too surprised that Victoria came to see me. Alexander Vanderbilt had never mentioned her in front of me, but once I accidentally overheard him talking to his mother about a fiancée named Victoria. Alexander Vanderbilt treated me too well, so well that sometimes I forgot my place and foolishly thought that I truly loved him. But no matter how happy I was never naive enough to believe I could be his wife. He was the heir to a vast corporate empire, with a bright future ahead of him. And I was just a mute girl struggling to survive. The gap between us was insurmountable, the difference between wealth and poverty, between his world and mine. At the start, he spent hundreds of millions to help me pay off my debts, and in return, I became his mistress. I never thought I could repay that debt in just 1 year. But when I met Victoria, all I wanted was to run away. My insecurity had always haunted me, and standing before such a perfect woman only made it worse. And even more so, her special status made me unconsciously obey when she told me to leave him quietly. I just didn't expect Alexander Vanderbilt, who was busy working in his study, to show up at that exact moment. He twisted my words, using my mouth to say cruel things to Victoria. Real or fake, his attitude was clear enough to make her leave in embarrassment. To him, Victoria was a rival in love. But I knew I wasn't even qualified to be her rival. A mistress should act like a mistress. Thinking this, I felt even more guilty for making my sponsor jealous yesterday. So when Alexander Vanderbilt returned from work, I was already waiting for him at the door with a flattering smile. I had even prepared a table full of his favorite dishes, but his face remained cold as ice. "Lillian Carter, I want to talk to you for a moment." Alexander Vanderbilt's sudden words and his serious expression made me a little nervous. "Last night, I shouldn't have said such harsh words to you," he admitted. "I'm sorry." I was stunned. I never expected him to apologize, because to me, he had only spoken the truth. Moreover, I had grown up hearing words like that. I no longer felt hurt by them. "It's okay. It's not something worth apologizing for." I smiled indifferently, but Alexander Vanderbilt's brows furrowed even more. "Lillian Carter, you may have gotten used to hearing things like that in the past, but if it made you unhappy, you have the right to feel offended and angry." I was momentarily stunned. Alexander Vanderbilt looked at me for a while before asking, "Do you have anything you want to say to me?" "I forgive you." "Anything else?" "Anything else?" Perhaps sensing my confusion, Alexander Vanderbilt patiently added, "You don't think you need to admit that you were wrong?" I lowered my head, thinking for a moment, but I truly couldn't figure out what I had done to make him angry. "You," Alexander Vanderbilt sighed in frustration, a mix of exasperation and amusement in his voice. "Next time when facing a love rival, don't be afraid, and don't think about leaving." He was upset. "Tell me, she came all the way here, and you couldn't show even a little strength? If you can't speak, don't you know how to use your hands? If she insults you, just hit her back." "But she's your fiancée." "Fiancée?" Alexander Vanderbilt sneered. "When we were kids playing house, she played the dad and I played the mom. Does that mean really have to get married?" "Where did you even hear such nonsense? Wait, why were you the mom?" "Ahem, is that the point here?" Alexander Vanderbilt sighed. "So do you realize what you did wrong now?" Honestly, I was still confused, but I couldn't let him stay angry. I opened the fridge and took out a strawberry mousse cake. I worked at a bakery. My manager was kind and never discriminated against me for being mute. Instead, they taught me how to make simple desserts. I never thought I'd have a use for that today. Alexander Vanderbilt glanced at it. "Did you make this?" I nodded. "It's for you. Don't be mad at me anymore, okay?" He stared at the mousse cake for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you sincerely apologizing?" I didn't know what I did wrong, but if nodding would make things right, then fine. "All right, I'll forgive you for now." The corners of Alexander Vanderbilt's lips lifted slightly. At that moment, I didn't understand why he suddenly seemed so excited. Not until 2 hours later. The sticky sensation on my skin made me want to cry. "Don't ruin my cake," I protested. The cold, hard table beneath me, even with a velvet rug, still made my back ache. I kicked my legs angrily. "Be good. This is serious work. How is it ruining anything?" Alexander Vanderbilt didn't waste any more words. He kissed me relentlessly. His fingers, stained with cream, trailed down my back, making me shiver. I wanted to cry, but I had no more tears left. "I hate you." I pounded my fists weakly against his arm. Unexpectedly, Alexander Vanderbilt just chuckled. All right, you hate me." He leaned into my ear and bit down lightly. "Whether my little mute hates or likes me doesn't matter. As long as you stay by my side, everything is negotiable. Just stay with me." A year ago, he had also said those words. Back then, my stepfather handed me over to an influential man as a gift to thank him. He told me that as long as I pleased him well, my mother's debts would be cleared, and he would return my mother's ashes to me. I had dropped out of school in middle school. With no good job opportunities, I had worked tirelessly for years, yet barely saved anything compared to the massive debt. I once thought that even if it took my entire life, even if I had to die, I would repay that debt to reclaim my mother's ashes. But now, my stepfather placed a different choice before me. After all, it was just sleeping with someone for one night. I tried to convince myself, but when the time came, I couldn't go through with it. I bolted out of the hotel room, my clothes disheveled. The man, over 50 years old, thought I was just playing hard to get and chased after me. It was in that humiliating moment that I met Alexander Vanderbilt. He had just stepped out of the elevator when I grabbed onto the expensive fabric of his dress pants. Desperate, clinging onto him like a drowning person grasping at straws. The old man, seeing me hiding behind Alexander Vanderbilt, spat out an insult before leaving. Anyone looking at my disheveled state would have assumed I had been assaulted. Alexander Vanderbilt wanted to call the police, but I stopped him. This wasn't assault. It was a transaction. I had willingly gone there, just changed my mind at the last moment. I signed my thanks to him, telling him he didn't need to get involved. But Alexander Vanderbilt didn't understand a single word. Even after realizing I was disabled, Alexander Vanderbilt was even more determined to call the police. Left with no choice, I knelt down and begged him. Alexander Vanderbilt looked at me coldly, observing me for a long time before finally giving up on the idea. Alexander Vanderbilt and I belonged to two different worlds. I once thought that would be the only intersection in our lives, but unexpectedly, I met him again at a bar. At that time, I had just been fired from a restaurant. The owner's wife suspected I had improper intentions toward her husband, and to avoid trouble, he decided to dismiss me. A kind colleague, knowing I desperately needed money, introduced me to a job at a bar. At worst, you'll just get touched a little, but the money comes fast and in large amounts. I didn't think a bar would hire a mute girl, but I still went to try. Perhaps it was because of my looks. When the owner saw me, he sighed and said, "What a pity." Then he still hired me. Alexander Vanderbilt was one of the first customers I served, along with 4 other girls. We were dressed provocatively, standing before them. One of Alexander Vanderbilt's friends was displeased upon discovering I was mute. The manager gave me a signal, and I immediately picked up a bottle of liquor, walked up to them, and downed it in one go. I was afraid Alexander Vanderbilt would recognize me, so I deliberately moved toward his friends instead. The alcohol burned my throat, and the intoxication made my head spin. But when I saw the tension on their faces easing, I could only continue drinking to play along. Enough. A hand suddenly snatched the bottle away. The alcohol had dulled my reactions, and I stood there blankly, watching him. "Come with me." Ignoring his friend's puzzled looks, Alexander Vanderbilt dragged me out of the bar. "No wonder you didn't want me to call the police. That old man was your client, wasn't he?" Alexander Vanderbilt's voice was cold. "I wasted my concern, thinking you were a victim, but in the end, it was just an act you put on yourself." It was only then that I realized Alexander Vanderbilt thought I had a transactional relationship with that old man. He believed he had been deceived. Perhaps it was the alcohol amplifying my long-suppressed pain and grievances, but after hearing those words, I couldn't hold back anymore. Jumbled sounds and rapid sign language poured out in frustration. People on the street kept glancing at us. Finally, Alexander Vanderbilt couldn't take it anymore. He ruffled his hair in frustration and handed me his phone. "If you have something to say, type it out." When all my humiliation was turned into words, it only deepened my despair. Tears fell uncontrollably, my fingers trembling. I don't remember whether I gave him my typed words in the end. I only remember collapsing from exhaustion. And when I woke up, I was lying in Alexander Vanderbilt's bed. It was a massive villa. A housekeeper called me down for a meal. Standing in front of the mirror, I realized my revealing clothes had been replaced with homeware, and my makeup had been completely removed. At the dining table, Alexander Vanderbilt was already waiting for me. He leaned back comfortably in his chair, but his posture didn't appear lazy. His tailored suit accentuated his tall figure and noble demeanor, making it hard for others to meet his gaze. Noticing my hesitation, he gently pushed a plate of food toward me. "Lillian Carter, I'll help you pay off your debt. You just need to stay by my side." The meal was almost over when Alexander Vanderbilt suddenly spoke. His words were tactful, but I understood his meaning perfectly. So, in the end, all rich men liked keeping mistresses. But why would he choose a mute woman like me? I couldn't understand, but this was the only way out of my predicament. After hesitating for a moment, I agreed. Maybe I had just jumped from one pit of fire into another, but at least this pit was a little more comfortable. Alexander Vanderbilt was a man of his word. Not long after, he brought me the debt papers and my mother's ashes. So, I had completely become Alexander Vanderbilt's mistress. At first, Alexander Vanderbilt never laid a finger on me. All he required was for me to have 3 meals with him every day. Other than that, there was nothing else. In fact, he even transferred a large sum of money to me every month as living expenses. But living with him, what did I need money for? Did he really spend so much just to hire a live-in housekeeper? Receiving such money without doing anything felt too overwhelming. So that night, I made an important decision. If I was to be his mistress, I should at least act like one, right? That night, Alexander Vanderbilt was stunned. His hands wrapped around my waist, his heartbeat unsteady. "Are you serious?" His voice was hoarse, as if he was holding something back. I nodded and, feeling flustered, kissed him. My heart pounded so hard it felt like the rhythm was being transmitted through our lips. I couldn't tell if it was his heartbeat or mine. The next thing I knew, I was flipped over and pinned beneath him. Read this later. That was his final warning. And from that moment, there was no turning back. The next morning, I went out to work. Although the money Alexander Vanderbilt gave me was more than enough to last a lifetime, enough that I didn't need to struggle for survival, perhaps I was simply born to work. Doing nothing made me feel uneasy. The only difference from before was that I no longer had to take any job that came my way. Now, I could choose the work I liked most. I had always loved the smell of baked goods. The owners of the bakery were a married couple. They didn't reject me when they learned I was mute. Instead, they let me work in the kitchen. At first, I only made milk tea and fruit juice. Now, I could bake simple pastries. But the moment I stepped into the shop, I unexpectedly ran into Victoria. She had been waiting for me for a while. Her striking appearance and outstanding presence immediately drew attention. "Miss Lillian, let's have a talk." Unlike the tension from last time, she approached me with a more composed attitude today. During my lunch break, she invited me to a nearby cafe. "Miss Lillian, I hope you can stay away from Alexander Vanderbilt." She got straight to the point. I typed a reply on my phone. "I have accepted Alexander Vanderbilt's money. Until he asks me to leave, I won't go anywhere. Instead of talking to me, you should start with him." Victoria's expression darkened. I was sure she understood what I meant, because that day, Alexander Vanderbilt's words, though spoken through my lips, had already made his stance clear. "Miss Lillian, Alexander Vanderbilt is not just any wealthy young master. His family is powerful, and he is their only son. His elders have high expectations for his future, including his future wife. Do you think his family would ever agree to let him marry a mute woman?" Her words carried no malice. She was merely stating the truth. "He wouldn't marry me. I was just his mistress." Victoria stared at the words on my phone for a long moment before suddenly laughing. She leaned back in her chair, her expression tinged with mockery. "Miss Lillian, do you think Alexander Vanderbilt is the kind of man who wastes money frivolously just to keep a woman? You've been living in his house. You call yourself a mistress? I wish that were true. At least if he got bored, he could just throw you away." The light in her eyes gradually dimmed. She looked toward the window, forcing a bitter smile. "Unfortunately, he's not that kind of man. If he were, I wouldn't have to come find you." Her words left me feeling dazed. I had never once considered that Alexander Vanderbilt was serious about this relationship. Even though he always emphasized wanting me by his side, I had only ever seen it as possessiveness. I was someone he had paid for, his possession. He simply found me new and wanted to keep me in his grasp. "Miss Lillian, I may have been a little rude that day, and I apologize for that. But I hope you understand how I felt when I returned from abroad, only to find my fiancé living with another woman." Victoria sighed, her voice sincere. "Even if Alexander Vanderbilt were to marry you, do you really think you could endure the expectations of his family? I'm not joking. His family practically has a throne waiting to be inherited." After saying that, she sat for a while before leaving. I stared at the coffee stains at the bottom of my cup, my mind in turmoil. Even after my shift ended, I couldn't concentrate. Sofia Rodriguez asked if I was feeling unwell and offered to switch shifts with me if needed. She was a second-year university student working part-time at the bakery, just like me. Working in the kitchen, she suddenly nudged me. "Miss Lillian, your handsome boyfriend is here to pick you up again." She pointed toward a Bugatti parked in front of the bakery. Through the window, I saw Alexander Vanderbilt stepping out of the car, polished and composed. He leaned against the car door, checking his watch, then leisurely lit a cigarette. Ever since I started working at the bakery, Alexander Vanderbilt had picked me up almost every day after work. Even when he was too busy to come himself, he would send his assistant. Recalling Victoria's words, I couldn't help but admit, Alexander Vanderbilt really didn't have to do all this for a mere mistress. But wasn't this just another form of possessiveness? Before he could lose patience and come inside, I stepped out. Alexander Vanderbilt extinguished his cigarette, tossing it into the car's ashtray. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he took my bag from me. He smiled and greeted my colleagues. Sofia Rodriguez giggled, teasing, "Miss Lillian, you're so lucky." But I couldn't bring myself to smile. In the car, Alexander Vanderbilt talked nonstop, sharing office gossip, amusing stories overheard in the break room, and the strategic battles he fought with senior executives. "Lillian Carter, I have a dinner party with Marcus Johnson and the others tonight. Come with me." He brought it up casually in the middle of our conversation. Marcus Johnson was one of Alexander Vanderbilt's close friends. I had met him once at a club before. At the time, his presence had intimidated me. Marcus Johnson had later explained that they were upset because they thought the club had exploited a disabled girl as a hostess, finding it cruel. Only when they realized the manager was in a difficult position and that I had been forced to drink did they hold back their anger. Alexander Vanderbilt was kind. His friends were too. And yet that was exactly what made me uneasy. Can I not go? Alexander Vanderbilt glanced at me, his eyes flickering with concern. Why, are you feeling unwell? I hesitated for a moment before nodding apologetically. His brows furrowed immediately. Without hesitation, he changed our route. I'll take you to the hospital first. I won't go to the party. I'll stay home with you. Panic surged within me. No, you should go. Alexander Vanderbilt pulled over, staring at me in confusion. I'm fine, just a little tired. But what if... You don't have to do all this for me. I interrupted him, my voice firm. Seeing his bewildered expression, I slowly signed with my hands. I'm just your mistress, right? No mistress needs her sponsor to step in for everything. Alexander Vanderbilt's face darkened with anger. He opened his mouth to say something, but when he saw the near-pleading look in my eyes, he froze. A long silence followed before he finally spoke in a low voice. You're right. The car turned back onto the original route toward home. When we arrived, Alexander Vanderbilt left without another word, his expression unreadable. Go inside. If anything happens, call me or call Miss Olivia. I might not come home tonight. I nodded. He gazed at me deeply before rolling up the car window and speeding away, kicking up a cloud of dust. Maybe I had been overthinking too much. After showering, I lay down on the bed and quickly drifted into sleep. In my half-conscious state, I felt the mattress dip beside me. A strong arm wrapped around my waist, my back pressing against a firm chest. His breath was hot against my ear, but it wasn't laced with the heavy scent of alcohol as I had imagined. Then, in a voice filled with sorrow, Alexander Vanderbilt whispered in my ear. Lillian Carter, what exactly are you afraid of? What am I afraid of? I don't know either. Every time I think about Alexander Vanderbilt being serious about me, fear rises in my heart. Just like the first time I met Victoria, I want to run. If Alexander Vanderbilt only saw me as a mistress, if this was just an exchange where both of us got what we wanted, then I could repay my debt with my body, the same debt he had cleared for me. But if he saw me as his lover, then how would I repay him? Offering my body was no longer enough. The moment love was involved, this ceased to be a mutual transaction. Instead, it became an obligation. My body could no longer be my only bargaining chip. So what else did I have to give? Nothing. I was once again that empty-handed girl from years ago, with nothing to my name, not even a single straw to cling to. Just drifting, waiting for fate to toss me wherever it pleased. The next morning, Alexander Vanderbilt was gone. For a long time afterward, he demanded me constantly. Before, when we were in bed, he used to talk a lot, as if trying to say all the things I couldn't, but now he was silent, just like me. And that silence only amplified the sounds of our bodies, making me feel even more ashamed. He watched my reactions with a cold expression, without saying a word. Finally, I understood. This was what I had pushed him into. I had forced him to acknowledge the truth, forced him to admit it. Yes, this was how it should be. A mistress, a tool for release, a transaction in bed, no feelings attached. Maybe there was something wrong with me, but somehow this emotionless act made me feel safe. Lillian Carter, there's a business banquet tonight. Go with Miss Olivia to pick out some evening gowns. It was a rare morning when Alexander Vanderbilt wasn't absent, the first in 2 months. He issued his instructions casually as he got dressed. I obediently nodded. After breakfast, I asked my manager for a half-day off. Miss Olivia, Alexander Vanderbilt's assistant, came to pick me up. She was an extremely capable woman. I had heard that only the best of the best could work at Vanderbilt Corporation. And the CEO's personal assistant was the elite among elites. When Miss Olivia arrived, she greeted me with a polite smile. She even knew sign language. Miss Lillian, this is your first time attending a banquet with Mr. Alexander, isn't it? Let me pick out a few comfortable dresses for you. The event might last quite a while, but you'll have to wear heels no matter what. I've prepared some silicone pads. Just stick them on if your feet start to hurt. Olivia Prescott's voice was gentle yet firm. Her words made my head spin, so I simply let her make all the decisions. There will be many senior figures from the business world at the banquet tonight. It's likely you'll have to drink on behalf of Mr. Alexander. Miss Lillian, how well can you hold your liquor? As she spoke, she continued selecting evening gowns. I recalled the only time I drank, downing an entire glass at the bar. Surely I'd be fine if I just drank slowly, one glass at a time. I wasn't sure where my confidence came from, but I gave Olivia Prescott a thumbs up. She burst into laughter at my naive bravado, then piled even more dresses into the fitting room. I tried them on one by one. Olivia Prescott waited outside. Before I knew it, it was nearly noon. I was on the last dress. But when I tried to zip it up, the zipper got stuck halfway. I had no choice but to ask for help. Peeking my head out of the fitting room, I was about to call for Olivia Prescott, only to find that the person waiting outside was no longer her. Instead, a cold and composed man sat on the sofa, absorbed in his tablet. Alexander Vanderbilt. Sensing my gaze, he looked up. Our eyes met. It was still work hours. Why was Alexander Vanderbilt here? He never mentioned he'd be coming. "Where's Miss Olivia?" I asked. "She had something to take care of at the company. Did you need her for something?" I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "What is it?" "The zipper, now it's stuck." I felt a little embarrassed. "Can you call a store assistant for me?" Alexander Vanderbilt let out a small sigh, got up, and walked toward me. I was puzzled. Standing at the entrance of the fitting room, I blocked his way. "A store assistant can do it. It's easier if I do it." He scoffed and raised an eyebrow. "Is there any assistant who knows your body better than I do?" It was just a zipper, but his words made my ears burn. Taking advantage of my flustered state, Alexander Vanderbilt slipped into the fitting room. The fitting room had 3 mirrored walls with a full-length mirror on the back. The space was originally quite spacious, but with both of us inside, along with the discarded gowns, it suddenly felt cramped. Alexander Vanderbilt stood behind me. In the mirror, our reflections were clearly visible. He once told me I was too thin, but I had never quite believed him. Now, seeing myself next to him, I finally understood. Compared to him, I looked truly frail. Alexander Vanderbilt's broad shoulders could completely shield me. The confined space grew warmer. The contrast between our figures in the mirror reminded me of last night. My face flushed even more. "What are you thinking?" His deep, husky voice broke the silence. "Nothing." I hurriedly looked away. "Really? Then why do you look like you're thinking about something?" He chuckled, his gaze heavy as it lingered on my reflection. "The same thing I'm thinking." I felt both embarrassed and annoyed. Before I could protest, he smoothly pulled the zipper up. Beautiful. His soft praise brushed against my ear like a heartfelt sigh. I turned around to look at him, but before I could say anything, he spoke again. "The dress." I suddenly felt foolish for thinking he had been complimenting me, but I couldn't deny it. The dress was indeed gorgeous, and of course, ridiculously expensive, something I could never afford in my lifetime. Before leaving the fitting room, Alexander Vanderbilt suddenly asked me, "Do you really want to attend the banquet tonight?" His tone was calm, but for some reason, I had a feeling he was hoping I'd say no. I shook my head. A lover should make the most of the evening, shouldn't she? I took his arm as we walked into the grand hall. Many guests had arrived, each with a beautiful woman on their arm. At first, I was extremely nervous, afraid that someone might strike up a conversation with me. If that happened, my secret would be exposed. They'd realize I couldn't speak. But soon, I understood. Here, women were merely decorations, like ornamental flowers men carried in their arms. I clung tightly to Alexander Vanderbilt. "Don't go anywhere." The crowd grew larger and larger. He pulled me closer, locking my arm against his. I wasn't planning to. In truth, I wouldn't have dared to wander off on my own. I was surprised to see that Alexander Vanderbilt was the youngest among these successful businessmen. Although he often said he stood on the shoulders of those before him, I admired how he could hold composed conversations with men far older than him. A few high-ranking directors approached to greet him. I couldn't follow their business discussions, but I noticed one thing. Every time they raised their glasses for a toast, their female companions took a sip for them. I was about to do the same, but just as I reached for a glass, Alexander Vanderbilt took it away before I could. "I'll teach you a trick for the second half of the banquet." He led me to a quiet corner. Taking a glass from a passing waiter, He poured something into it. Tea and soda water. Ratio, 2-to-1. In 5 minutes, you'll have a non-alcoholic champagne. He handed the glass to me. Just hold it and take small sips now and then. Make it look convincing. I was stunned. I never expected there to be such a trick. But shouldn't I be helping you block the drinks? Miss Olivia even gave me a packet of hangover pills before we left. Alexander Vanderbilt studied me for a moment, his gaze unreadable. No rush. The real drinking hasn't even started. Sure enough, when the second half of the banquet began, I ended up drinking all the toasts on Alexander Vanderbilt's behalf. One glass, then another. After a few drinks, my face flushed red, but my mind was still clear. Can you keep going? His eyes studied me, amused, like a man observing a ripe fruit. I nodded. Then, hic, a tiny sound escaped my lips. For a moment, we both froze. Lillian, so you can make sounds after all. Alexander Vanderbilt's voice carried a note of surprise. I was born mute. The only sounds I could produce were faint vibrations from my throat. Since meeting Alexander Vanderbilt, I had only ever made a sound twice. Once when I begged for help at the hotel, and once when I pleaded for him to stop that night. After several rounds of drinks, my mind grew hazy. But the more I drank, the harder it was to stop. Seeing that I was getting too drunk, Alexander Vanderbilt suddenly put a hand on mine, stopping me. Mr. Alexander, you brought such a beautiful woman to the banquet. First, you didn't let her drink. Now you won't let her drink anymore. Are you just here to show her off? Someone teased him. In my days, I heard Alexander Vanderbilt's voice, low, steady, unwavering. Not for others to admire. I just wanted to show everyone that she belongs to me. A brief silence fell over the group. I wanted to look up at him, but before I could, Alexander Vanderbilt pulled me away. A cool breeze from the balcony helped clear my head. Little one, enjoying your drinks a little too much, aren't you? Alexander Vanderbilt propped me against the railing, taking off his jacket and draping it over my shoulders. You drank even more than you did at the bar that night. Half drunk, I hazed up at him, then silently gave him a thumbs up. Alexander Vanderbilt let out a helpless chuckle. Brushing away a stray lock of hair from my forehead, he spoke in a voice both soft and cruel. In this world, if you want to be a lover, you have to know how to handle the drinks. He gently turned my face toward the glass doors. Inside, I saw 2 men swapping partners before stepping out together. Lovers are exchangeable. Alexander Vanderbilt spoke with the gentlest voice, delivering the most brutal truth. Suddenly, I felt completely sober. After all, a lover and a benefactor were merely in a mutually beneficial relationship. Nothing more. Alexander Vanderbilt looked at me with serious eyes. But is this really what you want? Attending parties you don't want to go to? Drinking glass after glass because you have no choice? Standing all night in painful heels? I didn't respond. Then, out of nowhere, Alexander Vanderbilt produced a paper bag. Inside was a pair of soft slippers. Kneeling down, he placed them at my feet. Carefully, he removed my heels and slid my feet into the slippers. Then he stood up. His gaze was deep, unreadable. This isn't how a benefactor should treat his lover. You understand that, don't you? A gentle breeze ruffled Alexander Vanderbilt's hair as he leaned against the railing, chatting with me that day. After I asked, he got really angry and went drinking with Marcus Johnson and some friends, but his mood didn't improve. At first, he planned to go home and talk to me, but I had already fallen asleep. From that day on, he decided to punish me so I could understand what kind of treatment a lover should receive. He asked me, if it's only about exchanging bodies, do you really like it? By reflex, I nodded, but then quickly shook my head. During those days, Alexander Vanderbilt wasn't exactly rough, but he made me feel like it was nothing more than an emotionless transaction. At first, I was fine with that because I wanted to prove that I could play the role of a lover. But over time, as the warmth faded, I started to feel empty. Lillian Carter, do you know? I always thought that only by offering my body in exchange for something from him, we could stand on equal ground. I'm sorry, he said. It's my fault for making you think that way. Alexander Vanderbilt took my hand, gently caressing my fingers. From the very beginning, I never intended to make you my mistress. At first, I just wanted you by my side. But when you misunderstood my intentions, instead of correcting you, I selfishly thought I could take advantage of the situation to claim you for myself. And I did. He sighed. Since then, you've always believed that your body is just a tool to repay a debt. There were times when I wanted to tell you how I really felt, but whenever you seemed to realize something, you would react so contradictorily that I didn't dare to continue. Then, when you asked me that question, I childishly wanted to retaliate. Lillian Carter, do you think my feelings for you are unclear? He let out a soft laugh. Honestly, I feel the same way, but the truth is, I've already fallen for you. Whether you say it's because of desire or love growing over time, I really do love you. I sincerely want to protect you, cherish you, and be with you for a lifetime. After that long confession, Alexander Vanderbilt took a deep breath. He reached out, touched my face, and said seriously, Lillian Carter, I might be even more despicable than you think. In the past, out of selfishness, I wanted to possess you, so I didn't correct your misunderstanding. And now I'm confessing my feelings while you're still dazed from drinking, hoping you'll agree in this hazy moment. I froze for a moment. Agree to what? I want you to stay by my side because of love. A sudden gust of wind swept away my intoxication, sending chills up my arms. Alexander Vanderbilt's smile and gaze were as warm as sunlight, illuminating the dark corners of my heart. My chest tightened as if it were a lemon being squeezed dry, the pain sharp and overwhelming. Unconsciously, my vision blurred. Tears welled up, clouding my eyes. His slightly rough fingers gently wiped away the tears at the corner of my eye. You don't need to love me too much, Alexander Vanderbilt said. Just a little affection from you is enough to make this transaction worthwhile. Then he smiled again and added, You know, I'm a businessman, a capitalist. I never make a losing deal. I burst into laughter through my tears. Among all the sign languages I had learned, there was no gesture that could fully express the joy and emotion I felt at that moment. After thinking for a moment, I decided to hug him. Once the misunderstanding was cleared, I felt much lighter. Sofia Rodriguez asked me, You seem really happy lately. Did something good happen? I nodded. Yes, something good. Haha, did you and your boyfriend finally make up? Sofia Rodriguez raised an eyebrow mischievously, playfully nudging my arm. How did you know? I typed. Well, a few days ago, you looked really down, and instead of him picking you up, a girl came instead. So, I guessed you two had a fight. Isn't that how love always is? She might be just a college student who's never been in love, but she sure understands relationships well. Thinking about something that had been on my mind lately, I asked her, If I want to go to college now, is it still possible? Sofia Rodriguez looked a little surprised. Sister Lillian Carter, you never went to college? I thought you were a student like me. I assumed you studied at a special school, so I never dared to ask. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I admitted, I dropped out after middle school. Now I want to study again, but I don't know if it's too late. My mother passed away when I was in 8th grade. At that time, our family relied on the living expenses provided by my stepfather. As soon as she was gone, he stopped supporting my education. Worse, he produced debt papers that he had forced my mother to sign. I knew very well that it was his own high-interest debt, but he had coerced her into signing it. Legally, a child doesn't have to repay a parent's debt, but to prevent me from escaping, he used my mother's ashes as leverage to threaten me. It's not too late. Not at all. They say we learn from cradle to grave. Nowadays, there are many universities for adults. Sofia Rodriguez enthusiastically told me about the entrance exams for adult learners. She even introduced me to a teacher who specialized in this field. Mr. Benjamin told me that by law, colleges and universities cannot reject applicants who are deaf or hard of hearing. Moreover, many public schools provide accessible learning environments, including sign language interpreters and assistive listening devices. Hearing those words made me feel like I was dreaming. Back when I first dropped out, all my peers were carrying backpacks to school, while I could only follow my neighbors to work at a factory. At that time, I always felt a deep sense of sorrow and regret. If I could return to a classroom, it would be like an impossible dream coming true. It's really not too late, I asked again. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Reading the words Mr. Benjamin sent me, I felt my heart waver. It was like a calm sea suddenly rising into great waves, crashing against the shore with relentless force. And then I realized that sound was my own heartbeat, pounding fiercely in my chest. That evening, I told Alexander Vanderbilt about it. I thought he would be as excited as I was, but his expression darkened slightly. "Lillian, do you really want to go back to school?" I didn't understand why he was asking like that, but I nodded firmly. Seeing my determined response, he finally smiled. "If you like it, then go for it. No matter what, I'll support you." Alexander Vanderbilt gently patted the top of my head. "I know some great teachers. I can arrange for them to come to the house and tutor you every day." Saying that, he reached for his phone to make a call, but I quickly stopped him. "I've already found a class. I want to study with other people." "Is it a mixed-gender class?" "Yes, it's a co-ed class." Alexander Vanderbilt furrowed his brows slightly and remained silent for a moment. Then he lifted my chin and said, "If you fall for someone else, I'll cry." Seeing his aggrieved expression, I couldn't help but laugh. A year ago, I never would have imagined myself going back to school. Even though my classmates were all adults, being in that environment still felt like reclaiming a part of my childhood. In a society where everything comes with a price, education is the one thing that is open and inclusive. It demands nothing in return. Whether you're a working adult, a stay-at-home parent, or a retired elder, no matter your circumstances, everyone has the right to learn. Having dropped out of school for many years, I had to start learning from the basics again. The homeroom teacher of our training class was a friend of Mr. Benjamin. He was very patient and meticulous, explaining every detail carefully. Before I even arrived, he had already heard about my situation from Mr. Benjamin and had even learned a few phrases in sign language. Sign language isn't easy to learn. It's not as simple to memorize as regular knowledge. After chatting with me for a while, the teacher smiled gently and patted my head. I don't even clearly remember how I learned sign language, only that my late deaf father had taught me. After class, my teacher and I walked out of the classroom together. From a distance, I could see a crowd gathered at the entrance. When I asked someone what was happening, they told me that a striking pink luxury car was parked outside. A bad feeling rose in my chest. Pushing through the crowd, I quickly confirmed my suspicion. It was the same car I had seen in the garage before. It was clearly a symbol of wealth, yet for some reason I felt embarrassed rather than proud. I was about to turn around and take the subway home when a familiar voice called out, "Lillian Carter, to celebrate your return to school, let me take you out for a drive." Alexander Vanderbilt stepped out of the car amidst the curious gazes of onlookers. He was holding a bouquet of flowers, which he handed to me before casually draping an arm around my shoulders. Then, with a bright smile, he turned to the teacher beside me and said, "Sorry, classmate, but Lillian Carter already has plans with me today." My teacher and I exchanged looks. It was only then that Alexander Vanderbilt realized he had mistaken my teacher for a student. "Hello," my teacher said politely. "Are you a family member of Lillian Carter? I'm Professor Wilson, the homeroom teacher of this training class." I could practically feel Alexander Vanderbilt turning to stone. "Oh, Mr. Wilson." He quickly recovered, showing his expertise as a seasoned businessman. Without missing a beat, he extended his hand and said smoothly, "Please take good care of Lillian Carter." Mr. Wilson shook his hand while I tried my best to suppress a laugh. Once we were in the car, Alexander Vanderbilt's face turned red as he muttered, "That was so embarrassing. Why didn't you tell me that was your teacher? Seeing you two walk out together, I thought it was some guy with bad intentions." I sighed. "Aren't you embarrassed driving this flashy car? Also, no one has bad intentions toward me." "You're so naive, Lillian Carter." "How so?" "Because I had bad intentions toward you, and now you're sitting in the passenger seat of my car." I was speechless at his shamelessness. Suddenly, I remembered something Mr. Wilson had said. Since I was used to communicating in sign language, I hadn't noticed before. But aside from the times when Alexander Vanderbilt deliberately pretended to misunderstand me, he had always conversed with me fluently. The car finally stopped by the beach just in time for the sunset. As the golden light reflected on the waves, I asked him, "How long did it take you to learn sign language?" "I didn't learn it." Alexander Vanderbilt pulled me into his embrace. "It's just that our souls are connected." I wrinkled my nose. "That's so dramatic." All right, he laughed. "I bought a sign language dictionary and hired a teacher to come to my company every day. I studied for half an hour daily and learned it in about a month. As if recalling those days, he took my hand and pressed it to his lips, whispering, "Lillian Carter, I once told you, when you use sign language, you look like an elegant musician expressing emotions and words through the graceful movement of your fingers." The way he spoke so sweetly was a skill I would never master in my lifetime. "Only a month to learn?" I muttered, genuinely impressed. Reading my thoughts, he lifted my chin playfully and said, "Don't underestimate me. I was an excellent student." "You're exaggerating," I teased. Alexander Vanderbilt narrowed his eyes mischievously. "Want to test this excellent student's abilities?" I didn't understand what he meant, until half an hour later, when the sky had turned completely dark and he pressed me down onto the car seat. While swaying with the motion, he repeated lessons from my study materials. I was so embarrassed I could die. Somehow, knowledge was entering my brain in a rather unusual way. He held my waist, his face flushed. "I can tutor you like this every night, okay?" "No need," I blurted out. "And do you really have to do this outside?" Alexander Vanderbilt looked up at me, his voice hoarse as he asked, "Do you know where I wanted to do it outside last time?" I shook my head. "In the fitting room covered with mirrors." My face instantly turned red, burning with heat. I raised my hand to cover my eyes, trying to avoid the deep, overwhelming emotions in his gaze. Victoria Kensington sought me out again in the 4th month of my training course. It was the same cafe as before. This time, she looked a bit haggard, but she was still strikingly beautiful. "I heard that Alexander said to his mother that he wants to marry you," she said. I was surprised. Victoria Kensington let out a bitter smile as she looked at me. "So, to be worthy of him, you're planning to take the adult college entrance exam?" She chuckled softly. "I wonder if you've truly thought this through yet." I understood what she meant. No matter how much I improved my education, it wouldn't make me a match for Alexander Vanderbilt in terms of status. I had expected Victoria Kensington to persuade me to leave him again, but surprisingly, she simply sat there in silence, staring blankly out the window. "I never imagined he would love you this much," she murmured. Despite her calm demeanor, a trace of sorrow flickered across her face. However, she quickly regained her composure. "If Alexander no longer loves me, there's no point in clinging to him," she said. "I'm not the type to hold on forever. But I did love him deeply once. I hope you understand that I can't bring myself to give you my blessing." Victoria Kensington picked up her bag and stood up, looking at me with a piercing gaze. "Let me witness the outcome of your relationship," she said. "I want to see how the two of you will navigate this difficult path together." With that, she left decisively, without another word. I deeply admired her. A person who could let go so decisively. Perhaps, in her eyes, Alexander Vanderbilt was not everything. Rather than wasting time on someone who didn't love her, she chose to release her attachment and pursue a world that truly belonged to her. When I opened the door to my room, I saw Alexander Vanderbilt sitting on the carpet beside the large window, even though he was supposed to be at work at this hour. Based on what Victoria Kensington had said, I guessed that he was probably facing significant conflicts with his family. I didn't say anything, just brought him a cup of warm water. Alexander Vanderbilt looked exhausted, his lips dry and chapped. He struggled to take a sip before wrapping his arms tightly around my waist. "When I went home, I found out they were forcing me to marry Victoria Kensington," he said. "In my haste, I mentioned you. I'm sorry. I didn't get the chance to talk to you about this first." I shook my head, signaling that it was okay. "Lillian Carter," he continued, "if I weren't the CEO, if I wanted to leave this city with you and go somewhere no one could find us, would you still be willing to be with me?" Alexander Vanderbilt's eyes shone like stars, full of hope. "I would," I replied. He paused for a moment, then smiled, a smile that looked more painful than crying. "But I can't do that," he whispered. "I want you to have the best life possible. I want our love to be blessed by everyone. I want you to be cherished by the whole world. If I could, I would pluck the stars and the moon just to give them to you. Because to me, you are worth more than all of that." His arms tightened around me. "Can you wait for me a little longer?" I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I still nodded softly. It wasn't until the next day, when Alexander Vanderbilt went to work and his mother came to see me, that I finally understood his plan. I had never met his mother before, only heard her voice a few times over the phone. She was known as a dignified and kind woman. But when I met her for the first time, I realized she was stronger than I had imagined. I knew she had come because of Alexander Vanderbilt, yet she wasn't like the typical mothers in television dramas. She didn't storm in, scolding or throwing money at me to make me leave. Instead, she pulled me aside, sat me down, and spoke gently about family. She asked about my past and expressed sympathy for my hardships. For a moment, I thought I saw the shadow of my late mother in her. "If your mother were still alive," she sighed, "she would surely be heartbroken knowing how much pain you've endured." She shook her head. "As parents, all we want is for our children to live well. We dedicate everything to securing their future." She looked me in the eyes then, and I finally understood the real purpose of our meeting. Our family only has one son, Alexander Vanderbilt. In recent years, I have grown older, and managing the company has become increasingly difficult. The responsibility has no choice but to fall on him. But the senior executives at the company are all cunning old foxes. Right now, what he needs most is a capable wife, someone who can always support him and help him steer the company forward. Her expression turned more serious. "Yesterday was the first time he has ever argued so fiercely with me. He even said he wanted to leave the Alexander Corporation and start his own business. This company has been in our family for 4 generations. How could I let it slip through my hands?" So this was what Alexander Vanderbilt meant when he asked me to wait for him. She took a deep breath. "I know you're a good girl, Lillian Carter. You're worth him doing all of this for. But love isn't everything. Right now, the two of you can throw caution to the wind and be together. But what about the future? Even if you get married, you won't be able to avoid public appearances at major company events. You are hearing impaired, and the world is not kind. People will talk behind his back. And what about children?" She hesitated before continuing. "I won't hide it from you. I did some research before coming here. Your biological father was also hearing impaired, and your condition is congenital. To put it bluntly, it's already in your genetics. Who can guarantee that your children will be born healthy? If deaf parents keep giving birth to deaf children, what will happen to our family?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at me, almost as if she were about to kneel. "Lillian Carter, I know I shouldn't interfere in your relationship, but I can't just stand by and watch him go down the wrong path. If your mother were alive, she would surely understand. Please, for the sake of an old woman like me, let him go. Break up with him." I held on to her tightly, stopping her from kneeling. Tears blurred my vision. Yes, I understood. I knew the distance between Alexander Vanderbilt and me was impossible to bridge. I knew that every word Mrs. Vanderbilt said was true. And I knew that if my mother were still alive, she would also advise me not to hold him back or waste my own time. But my heart ached. I didn't want to leave Alexander Vanderbilt. I loved him, and he loved me too. Sensing my hesitation, Mrs. Vanderbilt truly knelt before me this time, pleading, "Please, Lillian Carter, I beg you, let Alexander go." Her choked sobs shattered my heart completely. After traveling for over 20 hours, I returned to my hometown, a small village where my family had once lived when my father was still alive. Even in our hardest times, my mother had never sold our tiny brick house. It had been so long since I last visited, especially after my mother passed away, because the moment I set foot here, I would remember those happy days. But once the memories faded, I would be left all alone again. I was still too young, too restless to face those memories. My mother's ashes had been buried in the cemetery on the mountain next to my father's. The last time I returned here was to bring her remains. Alexander Vanderbilt had wanted to come with me, but I refused. I was afraid he would think that I had achieved my goal and was now leaving him. I was even foolish enough to consider leaving my ID card with him, as if that could prove my sincerity. Thinking of Alexander Vanderbilt made my chest tighten with pain. In the end, I was still immature. Faced with difficulties, my first instinct was to run away. Mrs. Vanderbilt's words had filled me with shame. I couldn't bear to watch a mother lower herself to beg me like that. Before she left, she handed me a check. The amount was enough for me to live comfortably for a lifetime. I refused to take it. She looked at me with pleading eyes, the same way I had once begged Alexander Vanderbilt to acknowledge me as his lover. And at that moment, I finally understood how Alexander Vanderbilt must have felt back then. Mrs. Vanderbilt wanted reassurance, so I accepted the check, taking it as a promise to her. Even if love was gone, at least I still had money. But Alexander Vanderbilt's presence in my life was far greater than I had imagined. I found myself unconsciously searching for him. Not being able to speak was truly inconvenient. His name was engraved deep in my heart. I spent an entire month in seclusion, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Then, one afternoon, a sudden urge made me turn on my phone, and so I did. Hundreds of missed calls, thousands of unread WeChat messages, all from Alexander Vanderbilt. I didn't dare to read them. Just as I was about to turn my phone off again, another call came in. Victoria Kensington. The phone vibrated twice before I picked up. There was silence on the other end for a second. Then I heard her sobbing. "Lillian Carter, come back now. Alexander Vanderbilt tried to kill himself." By the time Victoria Kensington and I arrived at the hospital, Alexander Vanderbilt had already undergone surgery and was moved to a recovery room. She told me that Alexander Vanderbilt had attempted to take his own life by burning charcoal in his room. Fortunately, Olivia Prescott happened to be looking for him and got him to the hospital in time, saving him from a fatal outcome. However, he is still in a coma. Victoria Kensington recounted that during the month I was missing, Alexander Vanderbilt desperately searched for me everywhere, tracking flight tickets and train tickets, but eventually he lost all contact. I had never told him about my past, and perhaps he could see that I didn't want to talk about it. So, Alexander Vanderbilt never actively brought up the wounds of my heart. In the hospital room, I met Marcus Johnson and everyone else. I also saw Mrs. Vanderbilt and Alexander Vanderbilt's father. The dark circles under Mrs. Vanderbilt's eyes were deep, her eyes swollen red like ripe peaches. When she saw me, she stopped crying and slowly approached, supported by her husband. I bowed my head, preparing for her wrath. However, the slap I had anticipated never came. Instead, I was pulled into a warm embrace. Perhaps because we both shared love for the same person, this emotion created a sense of resonance. Mrs. Vanderbilt, who had been holding back sobs, finally couldn't contain them anymore and broke down, crying on my shoulder. We were born different, but in this moment, we felt connected. Alexander Vanderbilt still hadn't woken up. The doctor said his health was stable, but he lacked the will to live, making it difficult for him to regain consciousness. Hearing this, Mrs. Vanderbilt cried for a long time. "Talk to him often, call his name," the doctor advised. I looked at Alexander Vanderbilt lying on the hospital bed, feeling overwhelmed with despair. Why was I born mute? Even though I tried to speak, I could only produce a few short, broken sounds. Day and night, I stayed by his side, not daring to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of his heart stopping would flash through my mind. Victoria Kensington couldn't stand to see me like this anymore and forced me to rest. "Lillian Carter, if you keep this up, your body won't be able to take it. If Alexander Vanderbilt hasn't woken up yet and you collapse, how will Mrs. Vanderbilt handle it?" I turned to look at Mrs. Vanderbilt, who had dozed off at the table, completely drained, suffering from prolonged insomnia. I feared she wouldn't hold out much longer. At this moment, I had become her emotional support. I tightly held Alexander Vanderbilt's hand, praying for him to wake up soon. This time, I wouldn't run away. No matter who tried to stop me, I wouldn't leave, because my greatest wish now was to stay by his side. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Autumn had arrived. The leaves had turned yellow, drifting to the ground, creating a feeling of loneliness. Mrs. Vanderbilt hated fallen leaves. She always saw them as a bad omen, so every time she entered the room, she would draw the curtains so I wouldn't see them. A few days ago, Mrs. Vanderbilt apologized to me. She admitted that she shouldn't have tried to threaten me in such a degrading way. She also regretted saying such hurtful words to me. "If Alexander Vanderbilt wakes up, I won't stop you two from being together. And if he doesn't, I will understand if you choose to leave and live your own life." Alexander Vanderbilt had used his life to force a reconciliation between her and me. He succeeded. But no one felt happy about it. I lay beside his bed, holding his hand, and drifted into sleep. In this world, only 3 people loved me. My parents were gone. If Alexander Vanderbilt left too, then no one in this world would love me anymore. Thinking about that, my tears fell again. Suddenly, I felt a rough sensation brushing against my cheek. The hand I was holding suddenly tightened around mine. I gasped and looked up, meeting Alexander Vanderbilt's clear, conscious gaze. He withdrew his hand and gently wiped away my tears, struggling to smile. "I heard you calling my name." My mind went blank. I didn't know how to react. Just as I was about to get up and inform Mrs. Vanderbilt, Alexander Vanderbilt sat up and pulled me into his embrace. My tears poured down like rain as I pounded my fists against his shoulder. Alexander Vanderbilt didn't dodge. He just held me tighter, as if he wanted to merge me into his body. "Lillian Carter, don't go. Please, don't leave me." He rested his head on my shoulder, his voice pleading. News of the Alexander Corporation's CEO waking up after a month in a coma made it to the business newspapers. I heard that the company had gone to great lengths to conceal the real reason behind his condition. Mrs. Vanderbilt hugged him and cried for a long time, promising not to interfere in his affairs anymore. She only begged him never to have such thoughts again. Victoria Kensington stood at the foot of the bed, sighing. "Love at the highest level, huh?" Alexander Vanderbilt showed no shame. He even chuckled and happily accepted the apple slice I had just finished peeling. "Even if I die, you must carve these 4 words on my tombstone: Lillian Carter's husband." Victoria Kensington widened her eyes in shock, disappointment written all over her face. Everyone left, and only Alexander Vanderbilt and I remained in the hospital room. I silently peeled an apple, feeling his gaze fixed on me. "You've lost weight," he said, his voice filled with distress as he lifted my face. "It's my fault. All my fault. I thought I could handle everything, but after talking to my family, I ended up making my mother pressure you. I never wanted you to end up like this." "Alexander Vanderbilt, that's all in the past. We had different perspectives. There was no right or wrong. You don't have to torment yourself over it. Just promise me one thing: apologize to your mother. When you were in a coma, she really suffered." Alexander Vanderbilt didn't say anything more, only nodded slightly. We looked at each other in silence. The room was so quiet that even the ticking of the clock felt deafening. "I thought I'd never see you again." After a long pause, Alexander Vanderbilt finally spoke. "You were the one who disappeared," I countered, glancing at him. "Alexander Vanderbilt, do you know something?" "What?" "The way you tried to end your life, it could have caused lasting damage." I deliberately cast a glance downward. Alexander Vanderbilt's face turned pale instantly. He panicked so much that he almost jumped up. "Lillian Carter, listen to me. I'm fine. Really, no after effects. If you don't believe me, I can prove it right now." Before he could finish, he noticed my blank expression and realized I was teasing him. He grabbed my hand and spoke sincerely. "Lillian Carter, I really know I was wrong. Please, don't be mad at me anymore, okay?" How could I ever be mad at Alexander Vanderbilt? If I was angry at anyone, it was myself for staying silent and running away. "This time, you'll really stay by my side, right? You won't leave again?" His eyes were full of hope. Time doesn't wait for anyone. It was time for me to be honest with him. I leaned in and gently kissed his lips. "Alexander Vanderbilt, I love you." As if hearing the answer he had been waiting for all this time, Alexander Vanderbilt lost all restraint. He pulled me into his arms and kissed me fiercely. I endured it all, my face burning with heat. Then I realized Alexander Vanderbilt was crying. Large teardrops rolled down onto my face. I was stunned, unsure how to comfort him. At that moment, I remembered I had whispered my love to him thousands of times while he was unconscious. But this was the first time I had actually said it aloud. The thought left a bittersweet ache in my chest. Before Alexander Vanderbilt could take things further, I slipped out of his embrace. Unwilling to let me go, he wiped his eyes. "I told you I have no problems at all." Once he calmed down, I took a deep breath. "Alexander Vanderbilt, I need some time away from you." Alexander Vanderbilt froze. By reflex, he tightened his grip on my hand, his voice rising slightly. "Why? You just said you love me, and now you want to leave? You can't do this to me." I quickly reassured him. "Alexander Vanderbilt, listen to me. It's because I love you that I'm making this decision." "When you were in a coma, I finally realized something. This was supposed to be our problem, but you were the one carrying everything alone. In the end, I couldn't even stand beside you as an equal. Alexander Vanderbilt, I want our relationship to be something that earns everyone's blessing. No matter how life twists and turns, your status means you'll always be scrutinized by society. And right now, I don't have the qualifications to stand beside you. Even though your family has accepted me. Lillian Carter, I don't care about any of that. Life is too short. Shouldn't we cherish every second we have together? Maybe my previous silent departure had traumatized him too deeply. Now, he was unable to rationally analyze our situation. Alexander Vanderbilt, I said softly. In this relationship, you've already taken 99 steps toward me. Now let me take the final step toward you. I smiled bitterly. It's just this last step might take me a long time. But we can take it together. Alexander Vanderbilt understood Heskect. He knew what I wanted to say, but if he were by my side, I would unconsciously rely on him. I would only think about acting spoiled and being lazy with him, never truly becoming independent. But I had never acted spoiled with him before. Alexander Vanderbilt chuckled helplessly. Then what are you doing now? I placed his hand on my cheek and tilted my head, rubbing against his palm. For the sake of our future, let me be a little selfish, okay? So Alexander Vanderbilt pondered for a moment before finally sighing. He cupped my face in his hands and pressed a deep kiss on my lips. My wife has such strong determination to strive for the future. As your husband, I can't be unreasonable and hold you back, he said, embracing me with a hint of helplessness. You've already said it, I teased with a smile. Even if you're not by my side, I won't change my heart, right?